evening, everyone. I am Dr. Drew Lichtenberg, the resident dramaturg and literary manager at the Shakespeare Theater Company. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to call myself a doctor still, according to the Wall Street Journal, but I will continue to do so anyways. Welcome to Shakespeare Hour Live. It is our 30th episode and our final episode of 2020. That is right. The Annus Horribilis is drawing to a close. Before we get started introducing our wonderful guest, I'd like to thank our sponsors briefly. Shakespeare Hour Live is a component of Shakespeare Everywhere, which is made possible by the visionary support of the Beach Street Foundation. Additional support for Shakespeare Hour Live is generously provided by Nan Beckley, and tonight's episode is sponsored by Livesy and John Moore. So thank you to everyone who makes this possible. I'm also joined tonight by my colleague at the Shakespeare Theater, our Director of Equity and Enrichment, Leonae Noble. Leonae, are you there?
I am here, Drew. Happy to be back at Shakespeare Hour Live.
That's right, you previously co-hosted which episode? Refresh my memory.
Uncovering the Past, Shakespeare, Black Actors, and Whiteness.
That's right. That was the very impressive sounding title for that conversation, which was a great conversation actually about the history of Black actors and Shakespeare, which is certainly something we're going to continue to explore here on the Shakespeare Hour Live. Without further ado though, and you're joining us from somewhere in Washington, is that right, Leonae?
Yes, I am in the DMV, yes.
The DMV, as we call it. Well, we are thrilled and honored to be joined tonight, closing out the year, by the multiple Emmy Award winning and Tony nominee, Mr. Keith David. Keith, are you there?
I am, and I'm going to use that Annus Horribilis. I'm going to use that. That's great stuff.
I believe it's the Queen, I don't know if she coined it, it's a Latin phrase, but I believe that if you Google Queen Elizabeth II, she talks about horrible years. Keith, where are you calling in from tonight?
I'm calling in from Los Angeles, California.
So it's like the early afternoon. I assume it's not snowing and sleeting and raining where you are.
No.
Well, Keith, your credits in theater and film and television are so extensive, I couldn't possibly do them all justice. I want to briefly list a couple, if it won't embarrass you too much. Over 150 roles, maybe over 200 roles at this point. Tony Award for Jelly's Last Jam on Broadway. 7 Guitars by August Wilson, also on Broadway. Oscar-winning Best Pictures, such as Platoon and Crash, decades apart. Notable directors you've worked with include Clint Eastwood in Bird, Spike Lee in Clockers, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, I have to say, and a key influence on The Wire. If you like The Wire, it's stealing everything from Clockers. Sam Raimi in The Quick and the Dead, the Hughes brothers in Dead Presidents, which I know is one of Leonae's favorite movies from the 90s. Michael Bay in Armageddon, the Farrelly brothers and There's Something About Mary, the Wachowski siblings in Cloud Atlas, and the new movie, or recently released 21 Bridges with Chadwick Boseman. And that's just film. TV highlights include starring as the family patriarch in Oprah Winfrey's Greenleaf, Blackish, Fresh Off the Boat. I could go on. And then you are known by your Instagram handle as Silverthroat, and your voiceover work is also legendary in the industry. So how did you do this? How did all of this happen, I think, is one of the things that we want to talk about tonight on the Shakespeare Hour Live. Because as you were telling us before we went live, it started with the theater. Is that right, Leonae?
Yeah, hearing that you studied at Juilliard and how unique an actor's journey can be, I would love to hear about what brought you to Juilliard and how that impacted and informed your career and your perspective.
first, I will say I wanted to be an actor my whole life. I knew I wanted to be an actor very young. And that is to say, at first, I wanted to be a preacher. I think that's the first thing I ever wanted to be, was a preacher. And then I wanted to be a lawyer. That's because I watched a lot of TV, and there was on the Donna Reed show, I loved Carl Betts as an actor. He later became judge for the defense. So when he was on the Donna Reed show, he was a pediatrician, and I wanted to be a pediatrician because I wanted to, he had such a voice, and his presence really, even then I was like, I like that guy, and I loved Leo G. Carroll, who played Topper. So when I watched Topper, I wanted to be a bank president, but I could be an actor, and I could be all that stuff. So I knew early I really wanted to be an actor. I was a singer before I was an actor. I used to sing in church all the time, and different choirs and things. And when I was 12, I started studying formally. So the Harlem School of the Arts was my first acting school. And I studied with a woman named Marion Quick. And I was obviously I was in the acting department, but there was a guy, Lenny, who I went to high school with. And Lenny also wound up going to PA. I don't remember where Lenny was from. I don't remember now. But we studied with Miss Quick, and but he was in the music department. And from there, it was wonderful because I had done plays. I started doing plays in the 4th or 5th grade. Yeah, my first role was the Lion in The Wizard of Oz. And then I played, there was a play called, in middle school, in junior high school, it was called Freedom of the Press, I believe it was called. And I played John Peter Zanger. And that, I think, I've never thought about this before, but I think that began some of my love of language. I'd never done any Shakespeare or anything, but I do remember one line from that play, and Peter Zanger was the advocate for freedom of the press and freedom of speech. And one of the characters coming up to me, "Are you John Peter Zanger?" I'm John Peter Zanger. And I just love that. So when it came time to speak Shakespeare and elevate a text, wow, man, I just felt I'm in my element here. I love this stuff. Get to say things like that every day, and especially with Shakespeare. Any and every emotion that you've ever experienced in your life, you can find a Shakespearean line to correlate with that experience. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. Who hasn't felt like that? So anyway, I guess I was going chronologically. From there, from Harlem School of the Arts, I got into PA, which is the High School of the Performing Arts. And I spent 4 years there. My manager, who I work with today, I met in high school. I came in the 9th grade. He came in the 10th grade. And we did his first scene together. And we did a scene from a play called Wednesday's Child. And the year before, I played the crying kid on the, it was like reform school. And the first line is, hey, kid, you crying? Anyway, Um, so we then, when we graduated, we both went to Purchase at SUNY at Purchase. And a year later, we both left Purchase. I was asked to leave. He had the option of coming back if he wanted to, but they advised him to take a year off. Now, I mean, this was 1973, 73 into 74. And, I was a very, kind of middle-class kid, I mean, so I didn't face as a child, a whole bunch of racism and shit. I didn't know what that necessarily, what that was when they were boycotting in Montgomery. I remember taking off from school. I used to love those days, it may not necessarily knowing what it was about. By the time it came into my awareness, and you begin to realize, oh, that's what racism is. It's that that agenda. Well, I faced it my first year of college when my speech teacher at the time said to me, we're not going to ask you to come back here, but you need to go study with an all-Black troupe somewhere. Don't even think about Juilliard. That's not for you. And now, first of all, at the time, Juilliard really wasn't in my periphery. I hadn't thought about it. But I did wonder why she did. And why, it was very curious to me. Why would you say that? I mean, anyway, so determined as I was to be an actor, that summer, I went to study at the Negro Ensemble Company. So I did go with an all-Black troupe. My teacher in that all-Black troupe happened to be a Juilliard grad who also went to PA. I think every year they have, after they do the mainstream auditions, they have a round of late auditions. So it was in that summer, he asked me if I wanted to audition for Juilliard. And we had been working, for most of the year, basically on auditioning. So I said, okay. And I got in. Ironically,
because the teacher was telling you, of all places, do not go to this one place. And of course, that makes you want to go there.
There was one other irony, because I had, the journey's long, and there's a big, long learning curve. Juilliard had a summer program that I had auditioned for that I did not get in because I just wasn't prepared. So it was a big lesson for me on when you're auditioning, prepare. Don't go in there half-cocked. And the monologue that I used was from Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, and so when in the summer program I auditioned with it, but I had to read it because I didn't memorize it. It was Shakespeare, and it's like, so I'm sure they were like, you didn't even think to learn this, son. Thank you very much. So I used that same monologue to audition the second night, but this time I learned it, and I got in. I was fortunate.
Now, Juilliard, for fans of the Shakespeare Theater, has attained a kind of legendary status because Michael Kahn used to teach at Juilliard, and he brought down, I think he tried to get you, Keith, for many years to come down to DC and be in a show, but Bradley Whitford, the list goes on of people who Michael taught. Jeffrey Carlson, Michael Urie most recently, who played Hamlet for us a couple seasons ago. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experiences with Shakespeare at Juilliard, because that's what got you into Juilliard, and also your experiences with Michael. Did you do scene study with Michael?
Oh, are you kidding? Michael, I mean, even today, my classes with Michael are like blazoned, like red letters in my memory. First of all, he and Marion Seldes had, as I remember, and sometimes it may not be the most accurate memory, but as accurately as I can remember, they both had a sort of not an agenda as to where, if you don't start right, it's not going to get right in the middle. So you have to start right when you're doing these, especially when you're doing a monologue. And I loved Marion because she talked about, I don't want to know you're about to give me a page-long speech. So however you begin, it shouldn't sound like you're going to go on forever. And Michael's thing was, again, like he said, it's not going to get better once you start 3 sentences down. You have to start right. So I have never been so wonderfully frustrated in my life. I mean, and I say that because it was terribly frustrating. He said, "No, I don't believe you. Start again." I don't believe you. Start again. And after you've done that 10 times, if you stop doing all that acting and all that stuff you were doing, you begin to get to something real, or but something that's outside of the idea of what you think is good acting, and you just and say the words, tell your truth. So I loved that. Ultimately, I mean, like I said, it was frustrating as hell, but in retrospect, it taught me a lot about how to work in your preparatory period so that you start well. I mean, you have to have a point of departure that's based in something outside of your idea of what it's like, or of what you want to be good. And if that's your only agenda, then you're not. Of course, we all want to be good, but that comes based in something, your relationship, where you're coming from, all these things. So I dug working with Michael.
So you moved from Juilliard. One of your early breaks was playing Aufidius in the Park in a production of Coriolanus. How did you meet Joe Papp? Because we had Des McAnuff on the show last week, and he directed I think a Henry IV in the Park with Mandy Patinkin in the early 70s. And he talked about how Joe Papp was this really hugely important figure for him and his career. Was he similar for you?
Joe was instrumental in my career, in my early career. I was about to graduate, and we had done a production of Othello, directed by Boris Tumarin, who was a great man. He was just a wonderful man. And that year they were doing Othello in the Park with Raul Julia and Richard Dreyfuss. And so I was going to audition. And they were doing Coriolanus downtown, but for the summer, Coriolanus was going to move from downtown to uptown. So they had the first play. Othello was the second play. And I went down. I went down to audition, and it was great because at that time Joe also sat in on the auditions, and I auditioned, and he was like, "Congratulations, the job is yours." And I was like, "Wow!" My head was, I was like, "Oh my God, I got a job!" And I got it, and this is before I graduated. And then and the other job, the other gift was I was for the first play. I knew I had Othello, but for the first play, which was Coriolanus, I got to understudy Ophidius. And that was my introduction. In fact, in that company was Denzel Washington, Jose Santana, Costulo Guerra. I can't think of Wayne's last name. And there was one other guy. There was 5 of us new guys. And it was, I had the time of my life, man. I had my first job. The day that I graduated, there was a place called La Crêpe across the street from Juilliard. So I went with my family to lunch after graduation. I said, "Sorry, y'all, I got to go. I got to go to work." So that was fun. That was big fun.
And I think it's interesting because one of the things that we keep hearing talking to people about their careers is this function that Shakespeare in the Park served of being sort of not the minor leagues, but it's like the first major league gig for the next generation of rising talent. I mean, one year it can be Denzel and Keith David, the next year, who knows? And I think it still serves that purpose.
I think it still does. I mean, it's absolutely the Delacorte Theater is absolutely my favorite place to work. I love that theater. I mean, I've done several plays there. I just absolutely love it. A wonderful kind of full circle experience. When I was understudying, I'd never, obviously, I didn't get to go on for Raoul. And Raoul was a wonderful, wonderful man. He was a wonderful actor and a wonderful human being. But I was not going on. And so 10 years later, exactly 10 years later, I got to play Ophidius. I understudied Ophidius in Coriolanus my first time. But this time I got to play Ophidius at the Delacorte. We were downtown now, back downtown in the
in the main public theater building off Astor Place.
Yeah, the Anspacher in the Anspacher, and had just a wonderful, wonderful time. It was that was a magical experience. As a matter of fact, speaking of full circle, the same woman who had dismissed me when she's the one that said, "Oh, you shouldn't go to Juilliard," that same woman. I was in the second scene of the play, so everyone's, they had snacks, in the lobby. So by this time I knew how much time I had to get dressed and everything. So right after I signed in, I ran upstairs so I could get me, I used to like those cookies. So I would go and grab me a cookie before I had to go on. As I'm grabbing the cookie, I feel this energy pass me. And I turned around and I called her name. And she said, "Oh, Keith, I didn't know you were in this." And I'm like, "Okay." And then she proceeded to tell me about she just finished reading a book about Frederick Douglass. Oh, Keith, you should play Frederick Douglass. I would direct it, but I think it should be a Black director. You know, so I mean, she, whatever her agenda was, and race, it was still there. Because I was like, I mean, first of all, I didn't ask you. And if I were to do it, you would be the last person I would ask to direct it. I mean, you know, it was like, anyway. So at that, I, you know, 10 years later, I got to play Ophidius. It was and it was a very fulfilling experience. It was Christopher Walken and Irene Worth. Andre Brower was also in that production. I mean, it was just I got to be good friends with a lot of people. Moses Gunn was in that production, and he and I became great friends. And it was worth the price of admission, you know. And that was and that year I won the Sinclair Bayfield Award for Best Supporting Actor in a Shakespeare play. And that was a great experience. And Colleen Dewhurst gave me my award. I mean, you know, I was like, whoa, I get to shake hands with Colleen Dewhurst. You know, it was for me, it was huge. It was huge because, you know, these were legendary actors, you know. I mean, it was a lesson every time you got to see them work. You know, in fact, in Coriolanus, Earl Hyman, who was one of my favorite actors, and in the history books, Earl is listed as one of the 20th century great Othellos. So we had many Othello conversations, and I love. I mean, wow, watching him work was like I felt like what it must be to be one of those actor apprentices in one of those old companies in England, you know, where you carry their boots and whatever. Because I played a soldier while he did his big speech. He played Cominius. And I would just watch how every night, you know, it was so precise. You know, you knew that he orchestrated this performance, but it was never boring. He used to do this thing where the idea would come to him every night. And I could almost cry watching him go, he'll never hear him unless his noble mother and his wife, let's to them. I mean, and it was like, how did he do that? I mean, you know, and every night, I waited for that light bulb to come on. And you could see it. If it was a cartoon, you could see that thing, bing! I mean, it was like, wow, I want to do that when I grow up, you know. So, I mean, that was Morgan Freeman was in that company. Morgan played Coriolanus, and Gloria Foster played his mother. I can't think of her name right this second.
Volumnia.
Michelle Shea played his wife. I mean, it was wonderful. It was really wonderful. And then, and also, and this is why I love being an actor, and particularly why I love Shakespeare and language plays, because here you have two really great actresses, Gloria Foster and Irene Worth, and they couldn't be more different. But, oh my you know, I could still see, Gloria Foster when she had that speech. I wish my son were in the desert and thy tribe before him, his good sword in his hand. He'd make an end to thy prosperity, bastards and all. I mean, he was just like, and Irene, you know, just the way they used the language. I got to be friends with Irene, and we did a reading of Prometheus. I played Prometheus in a reading, and again, she really helped to inform my work ethic, because in those days I was not I did not read cold well. I still don't particularly like it, but I'm better at it than I was then. So we had a rehearsal. We had several rehearsals for the reading that we were doing. I think it was 1 or 2 rehearsals. Anyway, we had gone through the rehearsal, and and at the end of the day, people were talking about, well, I'm going to go and have me a nice single malt scotch. And suddenly the conversation was just getting very, oh, single malt scotch, huh? Ears perked up. I'm like, And Irene looked at me. She said, you're not getting none of that. You better go home and study that script. That's what you better do. And and I was like, my slip is showing, so I better go. I will not have any scotch tonight. And so I didn't. I went home and looked at my script like I'm supposed to, and it turned out well. But it was a great lesson. And great acting doesn't happen magically. Great stars are great stars because they work hard. I mean, they have a God-given gift that that they're endowed with, but you can't rely on that alone. One of the things that I see today with some kids coming up, and everybody wants to be a star, but nobody wants to do the work it takes to be a star. And it just doesn't work like that. And there, we all have heard those stories of, the young lady sitting on at the soda fountain at Schwab's, and the director discovering them. Oh, you look like an actress. Come on, let me make you a star. But exception, not rule. And I mean big exception, few and far between exception. But that's my humble opinion.
But Leonie worked on The Gala, which you generously recorded a video for. And she was, well, there's a Merle Dandridge story, Leonie, that you wanted to tell in connection with Keith, right?
Oh, well, yes. Merle Dandridge, your co-star on Greenleaf, which is one of my favorite shows, and the language, and just, she mentioned how you would correct her words every now and then, and how you brought the classical theater presence to that set. And I was wondering if you connect Bishop Greenleaf and the plots of Greenleaf to anything in classical theater, or any Shakespeare characters or scenes.
Well, as you know, King James hired all the best poets of the time to translate the Bible. So biblical language is steeped in, sort of Shakespearean languaging. So the bishop is very familiar with all that stuff. So he doesn't have to, and I think being a lover of language like that, he's not unfamiliar with certain Shakespearean, quotes and passages. And I think one of the things that I shared with the bishop is finding those phrases and verses and quotes that fit the situation, the present situation here at hand. And I think, it's a wonderful thing that ministers can do. But it's like, if you meet someone who's had lots of experience in a Shakespearean company, you'll be sitting in the restaurant or sitting in a bar or sitting around a campfire, and suddenly somebody will come up with some kind of great Shakespearean quote that it seems to fit so well. No one else could have said it like that. During this pandemic, I was just saying to a friend of mine that it's like Richard II in the prison scene when he's keep time, and he finally gets down and he says, "I wasted time, and now doth time waste me." There's a depth of truth you don't want to necessarily own.
Well, and like you said, Keith, there are so many feelings that Shakespeare gives us language to express, where we say, I know that feeling. I've been there. I've been in that room. I want to quickly throw to our producer for the show, Grace Ann, who has been tracking the live chat comments and questions. I wonder, Grace Ann, it's been particularly lively tonight, she texted me. So I wonder if there's I wonder if there are any questions for our iconic guest, Mr. Keith David.
Yes, tons of great questions. I want to start with two comments, though. The first is from viewer Sheldon, who wanted to mention, he said, why, oh, why did we not include in your credits David Anderson of Mass Effect? So video game work. So I wanted to shout out to Sheldon there. And then the second comment I wanted to share is from viewer Renee Ingram, going back to the earlier part of our conversation about the Negro Ensemble Company. She said, wow, the Negro Ensemble Company, my cousin Clarice Taylor was one of the founding members. So I thought that was I wanted to
wonderful actress.
Yes.
My God. Oh my God, she was wonderful.
Yeah, I thought that was incredible. So I'm glad we have Renee watching. Thank you for tuning in. So I have a few questions I want to ask from our audience, and I'm just going to quickly throw them at you, and you can kind of pick up what resonates with you. So the first question is from viewer Robin, and she asks, Keith, what was your most challenging role and why? The second question is from our viewer Terry, going back to Shakespeare in the Park. He asks if you would have seen or have been aware of, growing up in Harlem, the 1973 production of King Lear in the Park with James Earl Jones. He wonders if that would have been on your radar when you were growing up. And then the final question is from our viewer Stephanie, who says, I'm inspired by your obvious joy in your work and your respect for your fellow actors. You seem to have achieved success quickly. Did you have a time when you experienced adversity, and how did you handle it? I would argue that some of the early experiences you described about being discouraged from Juilliard certainly might fall in that category, but maybe another story of overcoming.
Well, you'll have to remind me of the first two questions again, but let me answer backwards again. Sure. Adversity happens. Life happens. I consider myself successful because I get to do what I love. I get to actually, I'm living my dream right now. I'm living my dream. This is what I always wanted to do. So, what's to complain about? Does every job make me, giddily happy? But that's not what true happiness is. You have moments of doubt, and even despair. But that's a moment. That's not my day. That's not my life. I hardly have bad days these days. I'm not going to let you spoil my day. I may have a bad moment, and I'm going to try not to make that moment last too long, because I will leave you right there and say, you must be having a bad day. I'll see you later. I don't have to make your bad day my bad day. So, and I once read, when I first moved to California, I wrote this down in my journal. I don't drink anymore, and I haven't for quite some time. But in those days when I used to drink, after the show, the bar was the place to hang out. Anyway, I went to a bar. It was called Residuals in Los Angeles, and if you'd ever gotten a residual for less than $1, you could get a free drink. They stopped that after a while. Anyway, there was like a pin board, like one of those poster boards, and there was a note up there, and it said, "Success." No, it said, "Fame is what they give you. Success is what you give yourself." And I went home and I wrote that down. Wow. Because if one thing about and I'm going to make the distinction of actor as artist. And if you're an artist, nobody promised you anything. Nobody ever promised you a day of work or that you were going to make a living at it. Hopefully you do. And you can't believe all your press clippings, and you certainly can't believe all the press clippings that they say about everybody else. You can't mind other people's business. Ultimately, it's my experience that if you start comparing yourself to anybody else, somebody's got to lose. Your ego is going to tell you it's you, or your ego is going to boost you, so far ahead of anybody else. And in either situation, you separate yourself from other people and your humanity. So that's a lonely place. So I don't want to do that. So, everybody's journey is different, and, and careers, go up and down. You work, you don't work. That's the way it is. You make money, you don't make money. And you try to save a little bit of it when you do. And you accumulate your success. What was that first question again?
I think it was the James Earl Jones Lear in the Park, which was a sort of seminal production in terms of colorblind casting. That was, I think.
Right. I remember the event. But those days I couldn't afford to go to the theater too much, and I think it was in the Park, but I missed it. I didn't see it in the Park, but I did eventually see it on PBS.
And the other question I think was about favorite roles, and I want to take advantage of this opportunity. We talked about the past and the beginnings of your career, but I think we should also honor the present and the future by identifying, what role from the Shakespearean canon have you not played that you are clamoring for, and the larger question, classical theater.
I do want to play King Lear. I played King Lear as a student, and I got a hankering to play King Lear. But you know what I would really like to do? No one's likely to cast me as Richard II, but the language is so beautiful. I would love to play Richard II. I may be a little old for it at the moment, but given the opportunity, I would run with that one. That is-
Grace, was I wrong in paraphrasing that question?
No, that's exactly right.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone also asked, we have a comment that said, I would pay double to see Keith as Lear. So there's the last viewer question I'll offer, kind of piggybacking off of Shakespeare role you wanted to play, was if you, what your most challenging role was and why, whether Shakespeare or not. So that's the last viewer question. And then Leonie, I know you had some final questions as well. So I'll throw to Leonie after that, but most challenging role.
You know, each part presents its own particular challenges. I once played Richard III, and that was difficult for me. The language was one thing. I mean, I loved the language, but trying to find the balance in the physicality, and without killing yourself, I mean, I remember seeing like Olivia do it, and he's strapping himself in, and you've got a humpback, and you're doing all this stuff, and you got to make sure that you put your body in a position where you can get out of it, and not have to spend your whole paycheck on masseuses and the chiropractor. You know what I mean? Depending on how long you have to do it, stuff like that. But I mean, Richard was a big one. But Dead Presidents also. I loved Kirby and playing that part, but it took a long time to shake him off of me.
Now, there are a lot of changes happening in Hollywood and in theater to create a more equitable and inclusive space.
Mm-hmm.
With these changes that are happening, where do you see the future of classical theater?
I see it being done the way it always should have been done. The best guy for the job. I mean, there are a whole lot of reasons why people get cast in a whole bunch of stuff. And, agenda has always played a part in it, whatever that agenda is. And there are a whole lot of them out there. So, I mean, it's always been my policy, if when you don't get a job, why is not a spiritual question. You don't ask a whole lot of whys. Because sometimes you really just don't want to know, because it can be the damn stupidest reason. I worked with a director who hated green, hated the color green. She and said in the beginning, please don't ever come in here wearing green. And I forgot one day, and I came in wearing a green jumpsuit, a flight suit, and I walked through the moment my foot crossed the threshold, she said, get out. No, go home. You can't come in here like that. Go ahead. And I was like, wow. But, everybody's got their thing. So, I mean, being aware is a lot. I mean, the other thing is like, I've learned in my old age, don't complain. I don't want to complain about nothing. I certainly ain't going to complain to you unless you can do something about it. If you're going to complain to somebody who can do something about it. Because sitting here talking to me for 15 minutes don't mean shit. Excuse my French. I mean, it does, what's that going to do? What is that going to do? And you and you complain so much that you make people dislike you. All of a sudden they see you come, it's going to be another one. I don't want to be that guy.
You mentioned, Keith, the role in Dead Presidents being one that it took you a long time to kind of shake off. And I also think of your work with Spike as being not necessarily different from your other work in your career, but I think we often put up these borders or boundaries between work that engages a little bit more with contemporary society and work like classical theater, which we seem to regard as being separate from society or in a different, more abstract, more universal, quote unquote, realm. And that's certainly something we've discussed here on the Shakespeare Hour, which is that classical theater is always a reflection of contemporary society. It's reflecting contemporary attitudes, contemporary politics, whether we want to admit that or not. So do you see going back and forth between all these different types? I mean, the range in your career speaks for itself.
You have to, I mean, there's always a sort of rhetorical element when you're doing, especially when you're doing Shakespeare. And as much as you're talking to the person on stage with you, you're also engaging the imagination and the thought process of the guy sitting in the last row. And especially in a for me, and I'm just, again, my opinion, in a Shakespeare play, if I think rhythm is always a character in every scene, contemporary or Shakespeare, but especially in Shakespeare. If you can express that thought in iambic pentameter, be true to that rhythm, but also reflect a rhythmic way of expressing that thought that is not going to alienate the guy back there, but engage him, and without being just arbitrary. There's a challenge for you, buddy. Because you have to, I mean, you want, you don't want it to be, oh, it's them up there and me back here. Sometimes, for some people, it can be even more confusing when you speak Shakespeare in such a way that it doesn't sound like them over there and me over here. I mean, oh shit, I got that. I understood. I really understood that. It can, for some people, be off-putting. And especially like if you do a modern dress production, because people are going to come to the play with an expectation, and they're not going to get everything. They're not going to understand everything. But you get actors working together, and you get those rhythms working where it's like it sounds like people talking. It could almost be like you're going to a spit fest and you hear rappers, because they use language in a way that Shakespeare did, making up rhythms and making up words that really fit what that moment is. And again, it can be excitingly off-putting when you're sitting there and it's like, I'm really getting this. That's exciting. That's exciting. And to be able to be responsible for that, that's even more exciting.
When it seems like this is a through line, I don't want to generalize too much, but it seems like this has been a common theme throughout your career and continues to be one, the transformative powers of language. And also the difference between, you talked about preparation versus being in the moment, right? Which is kind of the actor's paradox. How do you prepare, but then have it be real?
You can't really be in the moment unless you're prepared. If you're not prepared, then your moment is filled with, oh shit, what do I do next? What do I do next? If you come to the table prepared, then if I say, okay, stand on your head in the corner and do it. Well, you can, because I know what the words are, and I know what I'm up to, I know what I'm doing. So you can play. You can't play if all you're worried about is, what's my next line?
And that spirit of play, I think, very, very strongly emanates, that spirit of joy and love for the rigor of the theater and of Shakespeare and language. Comes through in everything.
That's the fun is in the rehearsal room, buddy. That's where the discoveries are made. In that sense, for me. I mean, performance rhythm is a whole nother thing. It's almost anticlimactic to the rhythm of the rehearsal. Once you're in it, you've learned some stuff, and you get to play. You really get this. See today. Okay, now I'm gonna tell you some truth today, because I really know what I'm talking about.
I can't think of a better note to end on. Leonie and Grace Ann, do you have any final questions or comments you want to add before we wrap the hour?
No, I mean, I do, but it would take much longer. But yes, this is great. This was wonderful. I know I was taking notes as we were going.
Yeah, well, and Grace Ann?
No, just, I couldn't agree more. What a fabulous note to end on. And like Leonie said, I think we are all taking notes. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I had a great time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Keith, for joining us.
I'm gonna remember this. I'm gonna remember 2020, Annus Horribilis.
Well, as I said at the top, this is our final episode of the horrible year of 2020, although it's been a wonderful half year to spend with everyone here every week on the Shakespeare Hour Live. We will be seeing you all again on January 13th, 2021. We will be joined by the incomparable Diane Wiest, legend herself of screen and stage. And also joining Diane, James Bundy, the Dean of the Yale Drama School and Artistic Director of Yale Rep, and my friend, Dr. Catherine Sheehy, the Chair of Dramaturgy and Dramatic Criticism at Yale. So it's a kind of all Yale spectacular in January, when we will be joining you again. On behalf of everyone at the Shakespeare Theatre Company, I'd like to wish you a safe and happy holiday season. See you next year.